Our Bible studies are going to start returning to you by email, again coming to you on Wednesdays and Fridays over the next few weeks. I want to give you a bit of a background on this next section that we're going to be looking at in the month of September. We're going to have some of the readings from Genesis, and then for the first 2 weeks in October, we're going to move on to Exodus and have a couple of readings from there. I group these readings together as a season of struggle. And I know that we really don't like to have struggle. None of us do. We want things to advance. We want things to be better, but we don't often want to have the struggles that seem to be prerequisite for advancement to happen. Wouldn't it be nice if just for once the world progressed to a better state without the struggle that normally comes along with it? Some smooth, simple, nice, easy progression for a change, without hardship, without distress. It would be so nice. Many people think that that's part of the purpose of religion, right? Is that if we've found favor in God's sight, as the scriptures says from time to time, that we would have a life without hardship or distress. And certainly that would be a nice thing to have, but really isn't the case of the history of God's people. And really, we shouldn't think it'd be any different for our case either. We may not like for there to be struggle in our lives, in the lives of others, in the lives of people whom we love and people whom we know. However, if reading the scriptures has taught us anything, it should have taught us that struggle is part and parcel of our human existence. So our readings from September the 13th through to October the 11th will talk about a season of struggle. Now, the readings actually alternate between a reading about conflict and a reading about fear, back and forth over these 5 weeks. That's where this theme of struggle comes from. Conflict and fear are often part of the struggles that we do have in life. We start out with conflict on September the 13th, with Adam and Eve struggling with God. And then we have fear on September 20th, fear from Abraham and Sarah that there is no future for them, that after their lives are done, there's nothing for that family as they appear to be headed to die childless. And then on September 27th, we have the story of the conflict between Joseph and his brothers. And then on October 4th, we hear the story of the nation coming out of Egypt and the people, God's people, grumbling and the potential death of a nation. And then on October 11th, Thanksgiving weekend, again, we have the struggle, the conflict between Israel, the nation of Israel, and God. And so if those are the stories of our scriptures, again, it's not all that different from our own lives. And I do want to say to you that if we look at things that are happening in the world now, it really isn't all that different. We do have conflict with ideals, with the way that we hope that the world would be, and yet the reality of what it is. It's borne out in things like the Black Lives Matter protests, right? We expect a world where everyone is treated fairly, justly, rightly, with dignity. And yet we're far from that ideal. We have a world where there is food insecurity. Congo, Yemen, South Sudan, places where there is fear for future existence. We have conflict between nations, between Turkey and Greece over natural gas drilling rights. We have fear that is fed to us through fake news, or what we used to call propaganda, right? And it's hard to discern what is fake and what isn't. We have conflicts that have been enduring, like Syria, Israel, Palestine. Around the world, nation after nation, conflict after conflict that just seems to have no ending. These are the stories of our days, and they are the stories of our faith as well. Stories of conflict and fear. Stories that really, in the global experience these days, are not all that different from what we hear in the scriptures. So where's the good news in any of this? You know, as I looked at how these readings fit together and came up with it being a season of struggle, I thought, I don't want to preach a season of struggle. I don't want us to look at the scriptures and Bible studies as a season of struggle. After all of this time that we've had with this pandemic, please God, couldn't you just give us some happiness, some good news, some joy? That would be much better than these readings. We know, however, that God's presence in our lives doesn't bring about an end to conflict and fear. God's presence in our lives is to help us deal with the conflict and the fear that we run into, that are part of our lives naturally. And so, from September the 13th through to October 11th, we'll hear about God being active in Adam and Eve's life. We'll hear about God being active in Abraham and Sarah's lives, in the lives of Joseph and his brothers, and the lives of the nation of Israel. Even in the midst of that conflict and fear, God is still active. And by reading these stories and spending time studying the scriptures, we'll see how these stories are our stories, and how God was present with people in the past, and how God is present with us today. So I invite you to join with me in Bible study. In a little bit, we will add in Dianne and Linda, as we have in the past, to fill out some of these conversations about the scriptures. I invite you to join us, to join in the recordings, and join in the participation. Send me an email or a note, or give me a phone call, and we'll talk about what we're discussing in these Bible studies. And I'll see if I can include those in as well. I'd certainly invite you to join Linda and Dianne and I in the conversations that we have, that we record and send out to you. I'm going to record a couple of them on my own just to get us back into things so that we can get things prepared with Linda and Dianne, and hopefully over the next week or so you'll agree to join us in this. So my hope and prayer for us in this season of struggle, as we study the scriptures, as we hear them proclaimed on Sundays as well, is that we may come out of this season with even a stronger faith and a deeper knowledge of God being active in our lives. I hope you'll join me.